Glorious devotees, thank you for tuning in to this presentation on Srila Visvanatha Cakravarti Ṭhakura's Sri Madhurya Kadambini, the monsoon clouds of sweetness. In this presentation, we will be covering the beginning dialogue of the book, wherein Viswanath presents how Krishna enters the perception of the living entity. Madhurya Kadambini is primarily a prose presentation. In our presentation, we will be taking select ideas and quotes from Viswanath's Madhurya Kadambini. We will cite them and we will elaborate on them where needed in order to convey and nourish as much as possible the understanding that he is conveying. So he begins his book after the initial 2 Mangalacharana verses in praise of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Rupa Goswami. Quoting a verse from the Shruti Taittiriya Upanishad, wherein after the Taittiriya Upanishad has established Brahman as the origin, Brahma Pucham Pratishta, that Shruti continues and states that the Lord is rasa itself, and by attaining him, the living entity truly becomes ever blissful. Now, Brahman is a general manifestation of the Supreme Lord, Samanya Prakash, and this verse quoted by Viswanath comes in a section of the Taittiriya Upanishad, wherein there is first a discourse regarding the various coverings of the soul. Here, those coverings are presented as various koshas: Annamaya, the covering of nourishment; Pranamaya, the covering of life air; Jnanamaya, the covering of knowledge; Vijnanamaya, the covering of wisdom; Anandamaya, the covering of pleasure. Whenever there is inquiry into the nature of anything, one has to rely on receiving knowledge from a reliable source. Similarly, if we are going to inquire into the nature of our own being, into the nature of the self, then we need to have some confidence that the knowledge that we are receiving is reliable. This valid means of knowing must be based upon a truthful and reliable source of transcendental wisdom. We can find in this opening dialogue of Madhurya Kadambini, Viswanath gives some indication of the praman, or the evidences, he will be relying on for the spiritual revelation, which will be the substance of his book. We can find a detailed explanation of the Gaudiya perspective on epistemology, the nature of knowledge in regards to spirituality, given by Srila Jiva Goswami in his Tattva Sandarbha. And in his 9th verse there of the Tattva Sandarbha, which is the first of the 6 Sat Sandarbhas, we find the following in regards to epistemology. Jiva writes, "Now, in order to investigate spiritual reality, we should first determine a means of valid knowing, praman. In this regard, perception, inference, and other such methods are deficient because human beings are prone to 4 defects. They are subject to delusion, they make mistakes, they are liable to misrepresentational bias, and their senses are limited in functional capacity. Furthermore, these methods of acquiring knowledge are not at all suited to approach the transcendental entity whose nature is inherently inconceivable and beyond phenomenality. What is the nature of the evidence which the transcendentalist relies upon as a valid means of knowledge? Sri Jiva Goswami points out the valid means of knowledge is Sabda Praman. Sri Jiva Goswami further elaborates. He wrote his own commentary on the Sat-sandarbhas called Sarva Sambandini. And on that same 9th verse of the Tattva-sandarbha, he further explains. There are 10 proofs: Pratyaksha, Anuman, Sabda, Arsa, Upamana, Athapati, Abhava, Sambhava, Atithya, and Shesta. But the root Praman is Sabda, words without the faults of Brahma, Pramada, Vipralipsa, and Karnapatava. Since the proof, or semblance of proof, resulting from the other 9 methods gives false perceptions, being subject to the 4 faults, such proof cannot give true ascertainment of the highest goal to humans. Sabda, however, is without these faults. 10 sources of evidence have been pointed out according to Indian philosophy and theology. The first is pratyaksa. That's what we can perceive with our senses, directly perceive what we see, what we hear, what we smell. Anuman is knowledge that we can infer from our common observations. And then Sabda is revealed sound knowledge of the Apta-purusha, or a trustworthy person. Arsa, the statements of authoritative sages, rishis, devas. Pamana, knowledge of an object based on comparison with another similar object. Athapati, presumption, a fact in common knowledge. Abhava, cognition of the absence of an object. Sambhava, inclusion, that lesser amount in a greater quantity. Atithya, fact accepted in society as common knowledge, passed on by tradition. And Chesta, gesture or raising a finger to convey meaning. In our presentation here, we are not going to go deeply into an analysis of these various evidences that are accepted in the various Indian schools of philosophy. Rather, we will just present some information regarding Sabda Brahman, as this is the topmost evidence as accepted in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. Those seeking further knowledge should certainly study the Tattva-sandarbha of Jiva Goswami for a more comprehensive understanding of the various evidences and how Sabda Brahman is the topmost for serious spiritual inquiry. It is completely independent, and it appears as the Vedic Shastras from Bhagavan himself. It must be stated that Sabda is divine perception, known as Vaidusha Pratyaksha. So we have Pratyaksha of the material senses, but we also have transcendental perception, wherein Vaidusha, or trans-egoic perceiver, includes both God and the realized and perfected beings. This is, of course, superior to Avadusha Pratyaksha, or our sensuous perception, as it specifically relates to the field of the trans-empirical, or what we experience Often Sabda is also referred to as Apurusheya, transcendental sound descending from the Lord himself. So these others fall away, and we are left with Sabda from Jiva's comment that the root Praman is Sabda, words without the faults of Brahma, Pramada, Vipralipsa, and Kara Napatava. And these are the four basic defects, beginning with limitations of our senses. All of our senses are limited to some capacity. Sometimes even living entities inhabiting other bodies have much better sensual perception than we do in certain areas. Because of limited sensual perception, we can make mistakes. We sometimes get it wrong. And we also are prone to misrepresentational bias. This is also commonly referred to as cheating. We take our perception as superior to another's just because of our acquaintance with it, our material attachment. And then, of course, because of limited senses and our tendency to make mistakes and those biases, we also can be illusioned. We can be illusioned both circumstantially, for a short period of time, with a hallucination or a magician's trick, or our illusions can be more enduring, like illusions wherein we totally associate ourself with the material body and take on that temporary situation as our permanent state of being. Jiva Goswami continues in his commentary on the Tattva Sandarbha, due to the four defects, it is impossible for a person trying to ascertain spiritual knowledge to know if he has arrived at a truthful conclusion. There is no such incertitude, however, about revealed knowledge. He goes on, as servants are completely under the control of the king, so too are other types of evidence dependent on spiritual revelation in understanding transcendental reality. In certain cases, other types of evidence will be able to support Sabda Praman to the extent of their powers, but Sabda Praman is sufficient to stand on its own, dominating all these other types of argument. Anything established by Sabda cannot be disproved by any other proofs, whereas those things that these other methods are unable to touch can be established based on Sabda. Sabda Praman, generally in Indian philosophy, and specifically in the various Vaishnava schools of thought, what Sabda or what various transcendental sounds are accepted as the topmost. We find those to be the three great highways, Prasthana Traya. And there's Shruti Prasthana, Smriti Prasthana, and Nyaya. Shruti is that which is heard, Smriti that which is remembered, and Nyaya is that which is logically arrived at. For that what is heard, we have the principal Upanishads. For that which is remembered, Bhagavad Gita stands at the forefront, also Puranas, Mahabharata. And for logic, the various Vaishnava traditions have always looked to mature commentaries on the Brahma Sutras or Vedanta Sutra. So in this way, the various Vaishnava schools have established their lineages by acceptance of an explanation of these three, the Prasthana Traya, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and Brahma Sutra. For all four major sampradayas, this is the standard. However, we find, with the advent of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that Sri Chaitanya and his immediate followers did not place the main emphasis on the Prasthanatrayi, but rather they accepted the cream of the Vedanta, Srimad Bhagavatam, as the emperor of all evidence. Srila Jiva Goswami has presented to the Gaudiya Vaishnava community the conclusion regarding the significance of Srimad Bhagavatam in his Tattva Sandarbha. Again, we are not going to go deeply into this literature, but we will go over a few statements from the Tattva Sandarbha wherein Jiva writes in support of the position of Srimad Bhagavatam as the topmost evidence for Sabda Praman. In one area of the 22nd section, or Anucheta, he writes, "Thus we conclude that at the present time, those who aspire to know the highest goal of life should deliberate on Srimad Bhagavatam alone." He writes further there, "In this way, it has been shown that Srimad Bhagavatam is the emperor of all scriptures. It is thus highly appropriate that Sridhar Swami has interpreted the phrase Hema Simha Samanvita to mean mounted on a golden throne. Therefore, concluding that Srimad Bhagavatam is the preeminent scripture and the only one that is imperative for us to study, Skanda Purana states, what need is there of accumulating hundreds and thousands of other scriptures? It is thus established without any doubt that at present those who aspire to know the absolute truth should deliberate on Srimad Bhagavatam alone. Srimad Bhagavatam is indeed the essence of all Vedanta philosophy. He who is satiated by the nectar of its unprecedented taste, rasa, experiences no interest in any other literature. We find that Visvanatha Cakravarti also accepts this conclusion, and he writes in Madhurya Kadambini, Srimad Bhagavatam, the cream of Vedanta, an emperor among all types of evidence, also extols Krishna as the embodiment of rasa. In a famous verse describing the experience of those present when Krishna and his elder brother entered the wrestling arena in Mathura. So now we are back to our main subject, how Krishna presents himself in human society before our material senses. This verse is being quoted from the 10th canto. The various groups of people in the arena regarded Krishna in different ways when he entered it with his elder brother. The wrestlers saw Krishna as a lightning bolt, the men of Mathura as the best of males, the women as Cupid in person, the cowherd men as their relative, the impious rulers as a chastiser, his parents as their child, the king of the Bhojas as death, the unintelligent as the supreme Lord's universal form, the yogis as the absolute truth, and the Vrishnis as their supreme worshipable deity. Krishna is here presented as the embodiment of all rasas. He's not seen as that by everyone. He's seen by those present according to their mode or their appreciation for him. However, as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we understand his position as Rasa Raj, the personification of all rasa. And in a vacatory verse in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami describes Krishna as Akila Rasamrita Murti, the embodiment of the unlimited varieties of rasa. Srila Jiva Goswami also deals extensively with the concept of the topmost manifestation of the Supreme in his Krishna Sandarbha, wherein the virtues of the Parivas Sutra, Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam, are carefully and thoroughly analyzed, and Jiva Goswami presents this conclusive Parivas Sutra as the key wherein one can enter into the deepest and most appreciative understanding of the emperor of all spiritual literature, Srimad Bhagavatam. Visvanatha also quotes putting Krishna forth as entering the senses of the living entity. According to Krishna's statement in the Bhagavad Gita, Brahmano hi pratistaham, I am the basis of Brahman. And he writes further at the beginning of his Madhurya Kadambini, how can anyone fail to recognize Krishna, the son of the king of Vraj, who has an unlimited body endowed with Suddha Sattva names, forms, qualities, and pastimes? This blissful Lord descends to human perception, to the ear, eye, mind, and intellect, not by any material cause, but simply by his own independent will. Just by, as his own will, he appeared in the material world as Rama in the Raghu dynasty and Krishna in the Yadu dynasty. This blissful Lord descends to human perception of the ear, eye, mind, and intellect, not by any material cause, but simply by his own independent will. This then concludes a presentation on the beginning of Visvanatha's Madhurya Kadambini, wherein he presents the concept of Krishna's entering and presenting himself in a human-like form in human society. Visvanatha will proceed from here to show that just as Krishna himself is fully independent of any material influence, when he manifests a form in human society, similarly, his internal Swarup Shakti is also fully independent. Thank you so much for taking your time to view this presentation, and I hope you will return again as we continue to study Visvanatha's Madhurya Kadambini.